Wherefore, Part 42. Alfred doesn't remember when they started calling, so he suspects that they always did. A broad auroch chest can bring forth a bellow of magnificent proportions. The first he recalls of doing it, they simply called to each other, a joyful exchange, filling the night with the wonder of their being. For several full moons, he's noticed the silence framed by their calling, as though some other voices should answer from the distance. This sent him on an oddly mournful line of thought, imagining the last aurochs to survive in these lands, calling out to each other across the lonely miles with no answering call to be heard. Increasingly, Alfred listens to the silence between the bellows. There are empty miles of countryside with no aurochs. He thinks about all the other creatures who must have once roamed here and now are gone, and wonders how many more yet will be pushed to extinction. By October's full moon they are a glorious gathering on the hillside. There is such joy in their existence, in the unlikely magic of it all. But increasingly for Alfred there is also a painful sense of loss and absence. Even though he could not name every being who is missing from the landscape, he feels it keenly. It has become a knowing in his body, a grief he carries like a weight of stones inside him. He does not know that this is one of the many consequences of a thinning reality. The world is threadbare, with holes opening up between the warp and weft of existence. There is plenty of old grief to come seeping through the gaps. The memory of the land is old and invites this. Alfred wants there to be more, wants things to be better, and so what passes into him and through him is kind enough by nature. Inside the protective circle cast around the 5 valleys, the open pores of the universe do not invite too many monsters. It is not so everywhere. The thinness makes for hunger, for a gnawing dissatisfaction that longs to be filled and does not discriminate, a sense of inadequacy that demands easy answers and someone to blame. When the holes inside a person or inside a place are like this, they do not attract things that simply fill the gaps. They call to things that are also hungry and that know nothing of kindness. Day by day the weave frays a little further, and the magical protections holding the valleys become that bit less powerful. It is not a question of simple good and evil. Better to think about it in terms of ecosystems, literal and magical. A beaver is a welcome addition to a brutalised ecosystem. An auroch can fit it back in passably well. There is room even for the odd small glacier and the occasional mammoth. How many bored fairies can the district support? Here we enter uncertain territory. Such beings are tricksy and out of kilter with established versions of reality, but in line with folklore and some belief. The district can clearly handle some fairies, but perhaps not many. A dozen would be all kinds of problematic. The giants would be a nightmare if they were more corporeal. An ice giant would be a whole other magnitude of trouble. Even so, the ice and its champions have been calling out for months now, and if they can manifest an ice giant, they will. Can the local ecosystem take it? We don't know. Flood a place with too much magic, and you do not know who or what will drown. I'm sorry, that sounds like it was addressed to you personally, and you are certainly not responsible for the scale of the current mess. Unless you know something I don't and have been keeping very quiet about it. Even in years when reality is fairly solid, October is an infamously thin month. Things get through. Fairies, the dead, valleys that do not exist the rest of the time, this sort of thing. And so, of course, it is in October that the auroch herd finds itself answered for the first time. The cry is so faint and distant. It has travelled a long way, this first response, and then another faint voice, hundreds of years away, thousands of years away. There is a chill in the air, deeper and more uncanny than the night warrants. There are memories stirring in the soil. Deep beneath the hill, the dreamer hears the cry of aurochs long dead and aurochs who have yet to be born, and croons softly to them. It is the kind of song you might sing while painting their likeness onto a cave wall, a lamenting of their long absence. It is a song of calling back, of asking memory to become living flesh. Alfred does not hear the aurochs song from beneath the hill, but he feels it in his massive bones. He feels the lament and the longing, the call to be real and to exist in the future, and he has no idea what to do with any of the complicated emotions welling up inside him. He's not even sure how to name most of them, but here they are anyway, vast, inexplicable auroch emotions about time and solidity, ice margins and isolation. One auroch voice calls from somewhere else, be that a place or a time. A second voice answers. It is a moment when everything changes. You cannot hear this and not be changed by it. It is too much. This wildness, this weighty history, the ephemeral feather-light future possibility, everything changes. Sound is also part of the landscape, after all. We co-create the fabric of reality. Some of us weave tightly because we want everything to be under our control. Some of us weave deliberately loose because we hope to let something in. The weave is thin because so many threads are missing. The weave is thin because there isn't enough magic left. Once upon a time it was the work of a weaver to weave magic into the fabric of reality. Just the right amount. Knowing where to tighten the threads and where it would be fine to let a little something extra in. Once upon a time there were far more weavers, and the weavers themselves were better cared for. It is not a coincidence that the weaver in this story is as threadbare as the weave itself. It is hard to make good choices when you are bone-tired. Once upon a time the story told by weavers was that they were created by the weave, birthed from its knots and tangles to be its guardian. Before they were weavers, before there was weft and warp, there were other stories about calling the future into being by singing songs to it and painting the shape of it onto the rock. The dreamer under the hill was a weaver before weaving was an idea. He knows what it is to see the end of story and history, for he has seen the end of ice, the end of civilization, the end of life on the margins. He sings to Alfred about the lost past because anything remembered still has a life of sorts. He sings to the weaver about dreaming, painting, and singing the world into being because there is more than weaving, and it is too modern for him anyway, and clearly there are too many holes in it for it to be a good idea. His audience is not capable of understanding the full depth and breadth of his song. They cannot follow him into his half-light and mystery, but they are touched nonetheless. The memory of what was and might have been casts its shadow into the future and asks for attention, for possibility. Even as the dreamer does not believe the weave is good to work with, he reaches out to fill some of those hungry, gaping maw gaps with the best that he can muster. Stroud dreams that night in ochre and charcoal, ash, chalk and mud. It wakes in the morning to handprints in impossible places, and a feeling that everything is unreal. Fridges and televisions seem like the ghosts of an age that has already passed.